Yo, what is up, guys? Colt 412 the Fox here. Now, anyways, we are on our third episode of a Halloween nightmare on Friday the 13th. And man, all I could say is, for the past two episodes, it's been a lot of fun reviewing the first movies of Halloween and A Nightmare on Elm Street. And we are right now where it all started, before A Nightmare on Elm Street was created in the 80s. And I'm talking about 1980, Friday the 13th. And man, talk about bad luck. I mean, don't get me wrong. Friday the 13th, I think, is one of the greatest films ever created. I mean, it's got its own video games, and yet it even has somewhat of a TV series. But then I heard rumors on the internet that Jason is finally getting his own TV series. And I mean, hey, if that were the case and the rumors are true, I would love to see that. And I know everyone would love to see that too someday. But yet, a lot could happen, folks. And more importantly, though, who knows what could happen. But anyways, let's start reviewing this classic film known as Friday the 13th. The movie begins by taking us straight to Camp Crystal Lake in 1958, where all the counselors were having a good time, all the kids were asleep, but someone from a point of view was checking on the kids, making sure they were asleep that night. Well, a young couple were having a good time. And I don't want to go into detail what happened and everything, but anyways, what happened was they heard someone walked upstairs, and that was when, in the point of view, one of the counselors was taken out, while the other tried to fight back, and she was screaming so loud until we get to the title card of Friday the 13th. Then we cut to Friday, June 13th, the present, where someone new was walking into town trying to get to Camp Crystal Lake. Well, this young lady was trying to ask a dog in the neighborhood on wondering how far is Camp Crystal Lake. Then she walked right into a cafe asking one of the townsfolk on how far is it to Camp Crystal Lake. And then that was when one of the cafe workers suggested to her that one of the customers would give her a lift. And they were nice enough to do so. And they were nice enough until they ran into Ralph. And that's where Ralph said, "You going to Camp Blood, ain't you? It's got a death curse." But yet, I was stunned to see a character in the town. Like, I think he was, I don't know what he was doing. I think he was either trying to help this young girl, or he was just probably trying to scare her off. But any other event, she got in the truck, and the truck driver was nice enough to give her a lift to Camp Crystal Lake. And as she got into the truck, we see Ralph driving off on his bicycle. And as they were heading out to Camp Crystal Lake, the truck driver talked to her about the rumors and what went on that day, including in 1957, a boy drowned. And we all know who that is, which we will get into in just a moment. But anyways, he kept talking about the rumors, he said there were forest fires and everything else that went down at Camp Crystal Lake, and nobody knows who did it. So he dropped her off halfway from what looked like to be a cemetery, and she thanked him for the lift. And then later on in the film, that's where we were introduced to another cast of characters, which I think were kind of pretty cool looking and funny, but they have their sense of humor still. That's all that matters. Then we are introduced to the boss who bought out Camp Crystal Lake, worth over $25,000. But then that's where they were getting everything set up and ready. And then, oddly enough, that's where it was revealed that the final girl in this film was obviously from California, she said. But it was kind of stunning to me and shocked. Anyways, moving on. And then we see one of the other camp counselors that were hired for the job setting up the archery set. When the bow and arrow hit the bullseye, she was scared and she thought, boy, she was not happy. That's what I'm trying to say is. And I was like stunned on my mind. Like, I was like, are you nuts? You could have hit her right there, kid. But he was a comedian. I got to give him that. Then we moved back to the girl that was trying to get to Camp Crystal Lake until she tried the most dangerous thing, hitchhiking. She spotted a Jeep trying to get to Camp Crystal Lake. She stuck her thumb out and got in the Jeep. And by the time she started talking with the driver, and to be honest, our mystery driver was very shocked, but most precisely did not show any signs of talking back or anything else. Until the Jeep was moving so fast that the Jeep went past down the road heading to Camp Crystal Lake. It was until she jumped out of the Jeep and ran into the woods. And from a point of view, we get a glimpse of the chase. As she was trying to hide into the woods, all I could hear were seagulls in the background until she got taken out. And then that's when we head to the next scene, flashing out. Then we cut back to the counselors early on, trying to have a good time. As they ask, are you ready to get back to work? It was until one of them played a joke to make it look like they were drowning. But somebody was looking on from the trees around at the counselors and everything else going on. But then that was when, later on into the film, that's when they had a snake in the cabin. And then afterwards, they were like, how do you call a snake? And then afterwards, they took out the snake. And then the cop pulled up in a motorcycle. And that was when, about everything going on about Camp Crystal Lake. And then that was where he asked where Ralph was. Until the chief wanted him back in town. And as he left, we then cut to the kitchen where one of the counselors was getting ready to make their food. Until, lo and behold, Ralph was in there. And he claimed he was a messenger of God. And he tried to warn them to leave. And everything else that was going on, due to what's going on, knowing the place is cursed. And after one of the counselors stepped outside, Ralph was getting on his bike. And the only thing he said was, in the end, you're doomed. You're all are doomed. Until he pedaled away and got out of Camp Crystal Lake. But man, deep down in my mind, I was stunned enough knowing how Ralph is. Was he trying to warn these counselors or tell them to get the heck out of town? But deep down in my mind, I think the directors of Friday the 13th were geniuses. But in the end, I think this is by far, one of the best characters of all time. But anyways, moving on. But while for a while the counselors were making the food, everything they were doing around camp, which I think was a good idea, but then they were having problems with the power generator. They went to fix it. But throughout the film, it was actually really cool. You see something old school, but you can't beat the classics. But anyways, as the camp counselors were having a good time again, things were getting very cloudy and dangerous around the woods. As one of the other counselors were walking around, one of them thought they saw someone in the cabin. When he said, "Can I help you?" "Hello?" Then we come back to the other counselors. And by the time it was raining, oh my goodness. I don't want to talk about what happened, so let's not go into details on what happened in this scene along with everyone else, until I found out that one of the counselors on the top bunk was taken out. Well, later on in the film, one of the other counselors was relaxing until he got taken out. And I don't want to talk about what the killer did, but my gosh. Anyways, And then from the point of view, we see what was going on while the other counselors were playing a game. The other was in the bathroom. And from the looks of it, trying to get ready, from what I saw, was trying to wash her hands, but then she thought she heard someone in the bathroom. And when she looked again, she thought it was her imagination, but when she turned around, she got taken out. And oh my gosh, that scene was... I don't want to talk about it, but anyways, after later on the counselors were still playing their game, I mean, that one of the counselors realized they forgot to close their windows throughout the rain, so they called it a night. But that was when, later on in the film, we see that the counselor was brushing her teeth, but then somebody... So I don't want to talk about this scene, but anyways, moving on. Then we see the owner of the camp at the diner, having a good time, and then afterwards, he left a tip and left. And then afterwards, as one of the counselors tried to sleep, she heard someone screaming for help. She had no idea who it was that was calling for help. So she ran out, tried to figure out and investigate what was going on, who it was calling for help. But then somebody turned on the archery lights, and she thought it was a joke. While in the cabin, the other two counselors thought they heard someone screaming. And said, I saw the lights turn on. What? What's going on? So they went to investigate what was going on throughout the scene. But that was until what happened was they were worried about everybody else until they tried to get to the office to make a phone call to the police. But the door was locked. So they broke the window and got in, but the phone lines were down. And until it was revealed that the phone lines were cut and the engines of the cars were not working. And in my honest perspective, I think somebody must have cut the fuel line, it looked like. Anyways, throughout the other scene, the owner of the camp tried to get home, but a police officer was nice enough to get him home. And then, when the counselors were trying to call it a night, as we see from a point of view, then somebody cut the power. And then that was when, leading into the scene, one of the counselors realized the lights were turned out. Someone must have messed with the power generator, or it was out of fuel. As he went to investigate, we then see a glimpse of what was going on, but then we cut to the other counselor who was still waking up and realized, oh yeah, power generator. While the owner of the camp got back, he thought he saw someone with a flashlight. He was like, hello? Oh, hi. What are you doing out in this mess? But then he got taken out. But then afterwards, we head back to the cabin where she was making tea. But when she went to investigate what was going on, she found one of her friends taken out. And she was so scared, running through camp. She barricaded the door, locked everything to make sure she was safe. Until someone got thrown through the window and she got so scared. When she looked out the other window, she thought it was the owner of the camp. She ran outside, bolted, but it was revealed to be Pamela, Mrs. Voorhees. And throughout the film, they went to investigate what was going on, and she saw what happened. They thought it was best to get out of there, but she said, no, I want to wait for the owner. And then it was until revealing that Pamela, Mrs. Voorhees, was talking about what was going on. And that led to where she talked about her son, the boy who drowned, Jason Voorhees. And the more she talked about it, it led to where what happened afterwards throughout the film. You see flashbacks of Jason calling for help from his mother. And the more she kept talking about it, and she talked about what happened that day at camp, she pointed out that he wasn't a good swimmer, that he should have been watched every minute. While the other counselors were, I don't want to talk about that, so anyways, that was where it led to bad to worse. And it was revealed that Pamela Voorhees was the one who took out everyone at camp. While the final girl, which was the only counselor left standing, fighting back with everything she got. As the chase was on, Pamela, which I think was where Jason was speaking through her, it looked like. As the film progressed, I was stunned at first to see how it would go on. And that was when the fight broke out. But the camp counselor stood her ground and she was staying strong. And she ran back to the same cabin of what happened. But then she locked herself in the food pantry, thinking she was safe. But then that was where Pamela discovered her and broke down the door. And I swear, it looked like a Shining reference. If Pamela did that, she would have been, here's Pamela. But then the counselor knocked her out with a frying pan, and she made it all the way to the waters. As the fight broke out again between the two, Pamela was taken out. She got on the boat and got out of there. Until the following morning, a police car pulled up and 2 policemen were concerned about her, screaming out to her in words like trying to say if she was okay. But then that was when Jason popped up and pulled her underwater. But when she woke up, she was in the hospital. And it was later revealed as she started asking questions about everything that happened, and the cops answered her. But then that's when she asked about the boy. They were like, what boy? He's like, the one that pulled me under, Jason. That's when they said, we found no boy. And then that's when she said, he's still there, at the lake. And then the movie ends where it fades out to the lake. And I think Friday the 13th is a cult classic since the 1980s. And throughout cinema history, I think has really sparked one of the greatest characters in the history of horror movies today. Well, that about wraps it up here, and the only thing I'm going to say is I rank Halloween from 1978 to A Nightmare on Elm Street in the 80s, along with Friday the 13th, a solid 10 out of 10 for all 3 of them. That equals up to 30 for the first of the film franchises. And that, like I said, is a wrap. Thank you all so much for watching episode 3 of A Halloween Nightmare on Friday the 13th. Episode 3. I think this was a lot of fun to do on a review like this. And yet, it has been one wild ride. And I, for one, cannot wait to review the sequels, because it has sparked a history of film franchises. And yet, who knows what could happen. So once again, thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to to subscribe to this channel, turn on post notifications so you guys do not miss any more classic videos like this. And most of all, with a lot going on, who knows what could happen before Halloween, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you all so much for watching. And be sure to tell my friends I said, what's up?